Let's make use of the special offer _ready working file and look at how we can edit the data without leaving Word. So it doesn't matter where your data is stored, a Word table, an Excel file, Access database, we can actually edit the recipient list, so the actual source data from within your Word mail merge document. So for example, if we go to edit recipient list, and we've already seen that we can use this to deselect individuals or sort the data or filter the data. But what we haven't been able to do is actually change any of the values. You may notice when you're scrolling through that someone has actually moved since this data was updated, potentially Guy Brown here. Or there's a misspelling in somebody's name, or even in their address. One of the towns might be spelt wrong. So if it's data you want to use, that data needs updating. Now in order to update that, you might need to go back to a third party and tell them the changes, or you can edit the data directly here and update that data source. In order to do that, we simply select the data source from the left-hand side down here and choose Edit. That then gives you editing capabilities. Now this error has popped up because the cursor is in ID, which is a read-only cell, so let's just move it across. Now from within the data here, I can scroll through, or I can use the Find option to find a particular individual. Say, for example, I'm looking for someone called Robert, where Robert is in the first name field. No entries found, just Robert, not Roberto. And it jumps to that record. I can then click in and change any of the values. So it may be that his postcode is wrong. TS4 9TT. Now I just carry on, I jump anywhere else. I don't need to click save at the moment. This read-only keeps popping up because the data that we're connected to is an Access database, and the first column, the ID column, is a read-only option. You cannot actually edit it. Every time you click around, it tries to jump in there. I think it would just ignore it, wouldn't you? Now, whilst you're looking through the data, you can actually choose to sort any of the fields to help you really in finding the person you're after or people that you need to change. But any changes can simply be made to the data by clicking in, make the change, and then move on. We can also use this same screen to add a new entry. So I click New Entry, takes me down to the next cell, title Mr. James Arthur, lives at 89 High Street, Leeds, West Yorkshire, LS5 5TT, and then we'll leave the rest blank. Potentially we can't leave the rest blank. Let's give him an email address then. james@arthur.co.uk. Date of birth 8/2/1976. Salary 6543. Add a 0 on the end. Sex is 1 for male. Marital status sin for single. Apartment. Sales. Date purchased. And what did he buy? He bought Excel 2010. Telephone cannot be 0 length. Let's go back to telephone. It's the only issue with the data entry now that you need to fulfill all the database entry requirements. Tab to the end. Fax cannot be 0 length. There's fax. Put a space in. And when you get to the end, simple tab moves down to the next line. So we've been able to add a new entry. Obviously you've got to understand the requirements of the database and what data it needs to be able to do that. If you're entering into a Word table, there are no data entry restrictions, so you wouldn't have any of those error messages. So that'll be quite easy. We can also delete entries using this particular interface. So it may be that I wish to get rid of one of these Verily Stringents. So I click on the left here to select Mrs. Verily Stringent, delete entry. Are you sure? Yes. And then she's gone. Now there is an extra record here, 104. I'm going to delete that as well. Now when I say OK, having made changes to a few of the records and deleted a couple of the records, apart from the message about the ID, I then am asked if I want to update the recipient list and save these changes to sample 2013.acdb. So do I want all the changes I've just made to go back to the database, therefore updating the database for anybody else that uses it? Yes, I do. And those changes are then in effect in my data. So that's selecting the data source and edit. What you will find down here is that not all options are available depending on your data source. For example, when attached to an Excel file, you cannot delete the entry, and we cannot customize columns here for an Access database, but for a Word table, we can customize the columns and we can add data in regardless of any data entry requirements on the database. So the changes are made, the data is updated all the way back to the database, and then those changes are then reflected in the data that you then use in your mail merge.